You see my presentation now?
Yes.
Great. So my name is Jonatan, and I work with ChemSec, and I will talk to you about PFAS, as everyone has been talking about you here. But my focus will be more on how businesses and companies can help in the regulation part, and also how we at ChemSec can support that regarding where to find alternatives for PFAS. So I will just give you a very short introduction to ChemSec, because maybe not all of you know who we are. So we're an environmental NGO, and our aim is to reduce the use of hazardous substances. And we do that by cooperating with different stakeholders. And we do not do name and shame campaigns, and instead we try to highlight the positive examples within industry and within companies, because we think that's a more powerful way for us. Our funding comes from the Swedish Government and from some international charity funds. And we do this in a few different ways. We work with policy, so we try to influence the policymakers, and especially in EU, so we work almost exclusively on the REACH, the European chemicals regulation. But we work a lot with different companies and other businesses, and collaborate to around chemicals management. We also work with investors and help them to find a way how to do a sustainable investment regarding chemicals, because it's important that investors invest in the companies that do not. It's not a sustainable investment if it contains hazardous chemicals. And in combination with this, we also have a set of online tools, which I will talk a bit more about later. We have a business group with quite large multinational companies that we work together with regarding chemicals management. We discuss the challenges and the solutions to certain questions, and they give us an insight to what the reality is working with chemicals. And we believe that this is a very powerful way to understand how we can try to move the regulation in the right way. And for our tools, I think that some of you might know about the SIN list. I think that's ChemSec's most famous tool, probably more famous than ChemSec. So SIN list is it's a scientifically based list of the chemicals that we believe should be regulated. And we usually say that it's the candidate list, the EU list of chemicals that should not be used, but it's the future version. So right now it's about 1,000 chemicals, which we believe will end up on the candidate list in the future. Similarity is a tool for avoiding regrettable substitution, which we've been talking about here previously, that try to avoid just exchanging one hazardous substance with another, for example, which has happened quite a lot with the PFAS substances. Marketplace, I will talk about more today. It's our platform for safer alternatives. And ChemScore is our newest tool, and it's a tool for investors where we rate or rank the 35 biggest chemical producers, mainly according to how many what type of hazardous chemicals they produce. But since we're talking PFAS today, I will talk about ChemSec's corporate PFAS movement. So what this is it's a call for stricter regulation of PFAS, and it's a call for companies to join that call. We are looking for companies that have identified that PFAS is a problem for health and environment. You don't necessarily need to have phased out PFAS. I mean, the path towards being PFAS-free can start with joining our PFAS movement. And we think that it's a very powerful way to collaborate within different companies, and because usually there is the solutions for problems is more easily to find when you work together with other companies. So that's what we want to achieve here. And it's also a way for us, something that we can use when we talk to the policymakers to show that there are companies that do not use PFAS. And that's a sustainable and a very successful way to do business as well. So just showing which companies have joined. We launched this movement in spring this year. It's been slightly focused on Sweden since we're a Swedish NGO. So there's quite a lot of Swedish companies, but also some larger, more international companies, and from many different sectors. And as I said, we have focused on Swedish companies. We have, I think it's 32 companies that have joined now. And for us at ChemSec, we will use this to influence the PFAS restriction, the broad PFAS restriction, especially that Jenny talked about earlier. And we will also try to help the companies in their path towards being PFAS-free. We are planning to do joint events within the movement for the companies that have joined to discuss the PFAS issue and how to move forward. There are many common problems, like how to talk to the supply chain and where to find the PFAS, things like that. And we also plan to use this to understand which new alternatives that's most needed. Where can we find new PFAS functions that we can replace with alternatives? So next steps is to work, as I said, with the PFAS restriction. We will use the experience and input that we get from the companies in the policy work to understand what kind of regulation is the best way forward. We have already started to expand to add European and US companies to make it a more global movement. PFAS is a very large issue in the US as well, especially an environmental issue. So we will probably have a lot of interesting companies there as well. And as I said, we will have several events within the movement to develop the collaborations between the companies. But as Jenny also said, there is a very important thing when you want to substitute the hazardous chemical. You need to have an alternative, because otherwise it's a very problematic quest, because if you don't have an alternative, then you cannot replace your function, so you will have a product that it's not as good as the one you had before. So Marketplace is ChemSec's global platform where it's possible to find safe alternatives to hazardous chemicals. And this came from an idea from our business group that they pointed out that there was actually no place to find alternatives, or there was no place to find many different alternatives. So we launched this platform in 3 years ago now. Right now it's a bit above 600 ads of many different kinds and concerning many different alternatives. So I'll just briefly, it's a searchable database, so you can search for function or use or material or which type of chemical you want to have an alternative for. And you can, in many cases, the supplier directly on the website with a personal email. So we want to, the aim for ChemSec is to achieve this connection between the buyer and the seller. And in the end, we want that to lead to a substitution. Because as I said, when you as a company start the substitution process, one of the most important steps is to find out if there are any alternatives and if they are suitable for your process. We assess the alternatives, of course. We have a set of criteria which we check them against. It's basically the SVHC criteria with some additions, and we verify the information. If it's confidential information, we tell the supplier that they have to confirm that they fulfill our criteria. Otherwise, we will not publish an ad. So that's the assessment we do to make sure that we have the safer alternatives and not just the alternatives. So when we're talking about PFAS-free alternatives, historically, as we had talked about before on this webinar, textiles has been a lot of focus regarding PFAS. It's a consumer product that have received a lot of attention, especially with Gore-Tex and other outdoor clothing. And as we have talked about, they are both, the PFAS function is both water repellency and mud and oil repellency. The water repellency is possible to have similar performance with alternatives. The mud and oil repellency is more difficult to achieve. There are some examples, but usually you don't have the exact same performance. But we have quite a lot of textile alternatives for this at the marketplace. We also have paper packaging, as we said, towards grease for food uses. We have firefighting alternatives. But as we have pointed out before, there are so many different alternative or functions of PFAS that we have not focused on. This is an issue that has been growing, and right now we're in the quest to find new alternatives. As we saw from Ian's presentation, textiles is very small amount of PFAS use. We need to find out more alternatives for the really big ones. For example, lubricants is much larger. It would be very interesting to find more alternatives to that. So that's something that we have a work to do. And we need to understand more of the function. For some of the functions, like the cosmetics, it seems like they don't have any function. Maybe that's the case for other uses as well. And I also took some other examples. We have seen it before from Ian, that the PFAS are used in a very different array of functions and uses. And I should also point out that it's an industrial use where you can clean machinery and such with the PFAS containing substance or PFAS containing cleaning agents, meaning that you will have contaminants in the product, even though you don't actually have PFAS or use PFAS in the process. So it's very hard to get rid of all PFAS, even if you work very hard. So it's, for a company, it's a challenge. So I think that was my last slide. I hope it was interesting. So if we have time, I don't know if we have time for any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
Thank you, Jonatan.